As we start moving, to your right you can see Belfast City Hall, built back in 1906 on the site of the old White Linen Hall. The building features a prominent statue of Queen Victoria at the front. The reason being that it was Queen Victoria who granted Belfast its city status. During the Victorian era, Belfast became a very prosperous and wealthy city, expanding its population rapidly due to the huge growth in the linen industry, which was thanks to the shortage of cotton across Europe caused by the American Civil War. Chichester Street, which is named after Lord Chichester. On the left and of the street, you can see one of the old, very ornate bank buildings, which were built to house all the money sent in to pay for linen purchases, as well as for the ships put to Harland and Wolff shipyard. Things had to be paid for in cash, or maybe gold, as there was no such thing as bank transfers on those days, so Belfast needed lots of banks. Today, a lot of these lovely buildings have been converted into hotels or pubs, and they have been very successful. Imagine, a pub doing one in Ireland, a mystery. Turning left into Victoria Street, and on the right, the red brick building is Belfast's Old Town Hall, recently used as a courthouse and now lying vacant. Maybe someone should open a pub in it. Next on the left, you can see a yellow featured mountain, which is the Japham Memorial at the entrance to Victoria Square shopping mall. Lord Japham was the first and so far the only Jewish Lord Mayor of Belfast. After the memorial is Bittles Bar, the thinnest bar in Belfast. That is because this is the area of the old docks of Belfast where the Victorian Red Light District was. said the ladies of the night would lean against the clock waiting for the sailors to arrive, and that this pushed the clock over. On the left is the Custom House and Custom House Square. This was a good place to have the customs office, right beside the dock. Here you can also see the Big Fish sculpture, which is made up of hundreds of small tiles. Each tile was made by a different primary school from across Belfast. Takes us over the River Lagan, the largest river in Belfast, which flows into Belfast Lough Neagh. We are going to turn left into Queen's Island, and in front of us we can see Belfast's Millennium Project, which is the home of the Odyssey complex. The complex includes a bowling alley, cinema, various restaurants, pubs, plus an arena. The arena is an ice rink, and is the home of the Belfast Giants ice hockey team. Ice hockey is the first cross-community sport in Belfast, and the Giants are a very successful team, which has performed extremely well in the UK's Elite Ice Hockey League. Why is this? Well, the Giants employ Americans and Canadians to come and play for us, as they are really good at it. At one point, when deciding on a name for the team, the name Belfast Bombers was proposed, but it was decided against for obvious reasons. Driving into the Titanic Quarter, named after the ill-fated liner, the Titanic. The Titanic sank on the 14th of April 1912, but despite this terrible tragedy, with over 1,500 people losing their lives, the people of Belfast are very proud that the Titanic was built here in the shipyard of Harland and Wolff. We have a saying here in Belfast that the Titanic was alright when it left Belfast. This whole area was the shipyard of Harland and Wolff until the early 2000s. when redevelopment of what is now called the Titanic Quarter started. On the left is the SS Nomadic, the only remaining ship still afloat from the White Star Line. This ship was built to shuttle mail, baggage and passengers to the Titanic and its sister ship, the Olympic, when they were at Cherbourg, as these large ships themselves were too big to dock in the French port. Tours of the Nomadic are available. On the left, the large building in the shape of a star is the Titanic Experience Building, which is a huge tourist attraction. It has a tour explaining everything about the Titanic, from its conception to its tragic sinking on its maiden voyage. The red brick building on the left is the old drawing rooms of the shipyard, which is where the Titanic was designed. Today, this building has been transformed into a hotel named the Titanic Hotel. It is very popular with wedding parties, and, believe it or not, people have been known to have a few beverages at an Irish wedding and maybe even enjoy themselves a bit. The large grey building on the left is Titanic Studios, and this was once the paint room for the shipyard. It is now a movie studio and productions. This is where a lot of the Game of Thrones interior sets were filmed by HBO. Belfast has become a great place to make movies and TV shows over the last 20 years or more, and is fast becoming the Hollywood of Europe. On your left, you will see the HMS Caroline, which is the only still floating warship from the Battle of Jutland in 1916 during the First World War. It was used as a cadet training vessel for a time, and it is now used as a maritime museum. Tours of the ship are available. Locally, it is known as the HMS Never Budges, as it hasn't moved for so long. In the distance on the left, you can see a red brick building, which is the pump house, and the Thompson dry dock is below it. This is where the Titanic was fitted out with the likes of its grand staircase and luxury cabins before leaving Belfast for sea trials. As we turn back towards the city centre, on the left, you can see the huge yellow crane of the shipyard, which was once the largest cranes in the world, with Simpson and corroborated characters. Not used to construct the Titanic, as they were only built here in 1969 and 1918. They were built here by Aristotle Onassis, who famously married JFK's wife, Jackie, and Onassis built the first all supertankers here in Belfast using these cranes. They had become Belfast's answer to the has a very young population and is well known for its nightlife with many pubs, clubs and places to eat, including Michelin-starred restaurants as well as music venues. There really is something for everyone here, so please go out and enjoy it all. Just be careful of the locals, as they generally don't go out for just one or two drinks. If you join their company, you may be out into the early hours of the morning. Belfast's leather industry was once so big that Belfast got the nickname Linopolis. Machine guns in Belfast became the largest in the world, at one point produced 1/4 of the entire UK shipping tonnage. One being Nula with the Hula, and the other one being the thing with the ring. On the right coming up are the Lanside courts. Joining the courts are courts from one of the Italian so when this new courthouse was built in the 1990s, it was a big concern to water people were mostly clad in glass, as this was going to be a limitation of the hotel. Thankfully, this did not happen. Next on the right is the Royal Court of Justice. The large building you see around it is not an original picture, but is in fact a blast wall erected to protect the building from bombs. On the left is St George's Market, a Victorian indoor market that has several thriving markets a week. Its most popular is the Sunday morning market, with all sorts of foods available, plus live music and market stalls. It underwent an extensive and expensive renovation in the late 1990s, and is also used for small civic gatherings and concerts. into Bedford Street. where you can see a pretty busy area for nightlife, including Labourers, an historic family-owned bar on the left, and Benedict's Hotel on the right, a great spot for cocktails and evening meals. Which are highly recommended for a visit, feature a Victorian palm house, as well as the Ulster Museum and its collections of art. is Elmwood Avenue, a typical leafy, tree-lined street in the more expensive BT9 postcode area of Belfast. Interestingly, it has two churches, one at each end of the street, one called All Saints and one called All Souls. At the bottom of the avenue is the Queen's University Medical Biology building, where many a young doctor and nurse have been trained. The building joins onto Belfast City Hospital with its iconic tower dome, which can be seen from much of Belfast. Passing the City Hospital on the left, an old cement hotel can be seen on the right. This was the Russell Court Hotel, which was blown up twice in the 1970s, forcing its owners to abandon it. For a period, it was used for nurses' accommodation and emergency accommodation. This is a very old part of Belfast called Sandy Row, which is currently undergoing redevelopment thanks to a new transport hub. This is a Protestant loyalist area and was home to Alex Higgins, who was world snooker champion in both 1972 and 1982. Various murals can be seen along Sandy Row, including one of George Best, the legendary footballer from East Belfast, who now has an airport named after him. George Best was born in Belfast and is widely considered to be one of the best footballers of all time. He mostly played for Manchester United and had a very colourful life. He married two Miss Worlds and famously said, "I spent a lot of money on booze, birds and fast cars. The rest I just squandered." As we turn right out of Sandy Row, if you look to the left, you can see one of the largest murals in Belfast, which is of King William III, the Dutch Prince of Orange. We will now pass by some of Belfast's newest hotels, and then back onto the Golden Mile. Great Victoria Street is the home of Belfast's most famous hotel, the New Europa Hotel. It is famous for all the wrong reasons. Bombed out 36 times from when it opened in 1971 until 1993. It is also where Bill and Hillary Clinton stayed when they visited Belfast in 1995. On the right opposite the hotel is Belfast's most famous pub, the Crown Liquor Saloon, which is a very fine example of a Victorian gin palace. It is divided into private snugs and is featured in various TV shows and movies, including Odd Man Out and an episode of Cold Feet. It is very heavily decorated with tiles and stained glass windows, all produced by Italians who were in Belfast building churches and were persuaded by the owner of the pub to work on his bar. Also there is the Grand Opera House, one of the finest auditoriums in Europe, and possibly the most bombed theatre in Europe. As when the Europa Hotel got bombed, the Opera House was often damaged too. Charlie Chaplin performed here, and so did Luciano Pavarotti, among many others. Belfast was in the headlines for all the wrong reasons for much of the 20th century, and even into the 21st century, as sectarian tensions boiled over between the two communities in the city. The Protestant Unionist side of the community were called Loyalists, as they were loyal to the King or Queen and wished to remain part of the UK. On the other side, the Roman Catholic nationalist side of the community, known as Republicans, desired to have a united Ireland with no British influence or control. This was a very sad and depressing time for Belfast and its inhabitants, as the Republican terror groups tried to bomb the British out of Ireland, and in return, the Loyalist terror groups resorted to shooting and killing people from the Republican side of the community. Both groups succeeded in killing many innocent people. These tensions became known as the Troubles, which was a civil war between the two communities from 1969 until 1998, when the Good Friday Agreement was signed after a referendum which was voted for overwhelmingly by the population of Northern Ireland. As we drive through both sides of the community, you will see identifying murals showing these communities' fallen heroes, their stories, and their affiliation with other political struggles across the world. We will also look at the peace walls of Belfast, built by the British Army starting in 1969, when they tried to divide the communities for their own safety. As we turn left into British Street, we are entering the heartland of the population of Belfast. In front of us, we can see this tower, a typical 1960s cement tower, 96 flats of social housing, 17 However, 1970s, the British Army occupied the top 2 floors of this building and used it as an army observation post with great views across Belfast from the top. This post remained until 2005. When the building was used by the army, they could only access the post by helicopter, as it would be too dangerous to use the stairs. It features prominently in a local TV comedy series called Give My Head Peace. On the right, above the red brick houses, the peace line is very clearly visible. This peace wall divides the Republican Falls area with the Royalist Shankill area, where similar houses are only a few feet away from the peace. This wall continues to the right as we drive along the road, and if you look along some of the streets on the right, you can see they've been completely sealed off, with no access to the other side at all. The large map peace line, and it has 2 entrances for the workers to use, one for the Catholic workers to use, and another on the other side for Protestant workers. The wall of the Flower Mill has numerous murals painted on it, and is known as the International Wall. The murals here will have been painted by the Republican side of the community and are often changed to show current international conflicts, as well as local heroes and conflict memorials. As we turn right onto Northumberland Street, you can see a set of gates. These are closed every night at 7 p.m. and reopened at 7 a.m. These are just one set of gates, and this is just one peace wall of many across Belfast. We're now crossing over from the Republican Falls area into the Loyalist Shankill area. Display the story of the armed struggle of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, commonly known as the IRA. The murals in this area often depict the hunger strikers of the 1981 Mace prison hunger strike, in which 10 men starved themselves to death in protest at having no political status as prisoners in Her Majesty's Prison for Maze, which is about 16 miles from Belfast. The first man to go on hunger strike was Bobby Sands, who died after 66 days refusing food. By the time he died, he had become a British Member of Parliament, as his name had been put forward by Sinn Féin, the political wing of the Republican movement, to be a candidate in the by-election in Fermanagh and South Tyrone. He got the majority of votes. This was highly embarrassing for the British government, and Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister, had the rules changed so prisoners could not become MPs in the future. The hunger strikes drew worldwide publicity and were a very big propaganda win for the Republican movement. soon as we cross the peace line, it is immediately apparent that we are in the Royalist area, as the murals to the right of the bus show Union flags and memorials of the First and Second World Wars. Before taking a look at Royalist shelter, we are going to travel along the peace wall to give you an idea of its scale. The peace walls were built on permission back in 1969 when the army had been colonizing Northern Ireland at the request of the Royalist side of the community to protect the Royalist side of the community. Not knowing what to do with the two communities who were trying to kill each other, the army decided just to keep them apart, and they started building temporary peace lines, mostly using corrugated iron walls. Soon they realised they would need stronger walls and started to build them from reinforced concrete. As you can see, the walls are very strong, but they weren't tall enough. The stones and missiles could be thrown over the wall. The British Army put a fence on top of the wall, but this was still not high enough, so they had to put a fence on top of the fence on top of the wall. However, the wall is still not high enough. If throwing stones was an Olympic event, Northern Ireland would be gold medal winners every time. Along the wall are various paintings and graffiti paintings painted by artists from all over the world. But if you look closely, you can see where tourists from around the world have written messages of peace on the wall and signed their names. There are a few dirty jewels written on the wall, so it's perhaps best not to look too closely. If you look left, when the bus turns to the right, you will see the Lanark Way gates, one of the biggest crossings of the peace line. These gates are usually open 24 hours a day. But if the police see trouble, they can remotely shut the gates as they are electronically operated. Others show memorials from the First and Second World Wars, as many people from this area would have joined the British Army and still do to this day. Other murals show memorials to the loyalist paramilitary groups set up during the Troubles, in opposition to the Republican paramilitary groups. On the left is the Court Credit Union building. This was the site of the Shankill bombing on the 23rd of October 1993. At the time, this building was a fish shop, and it was blown up by the IRA, killing 9 innocent shoppers on a Saturday afternoon. The bombing brought about a terrible time in Northern Ireland's history, as the loyalist paramilitaries mounted a campaign of terror against the Republican side of the community. Eventually, this culminated in the IRA calling a ceasefire 10 months later in August 1994, and this started what we now call the peace process. Near here, you will also see murals of the King and Queen, as well as murals commemorating various bombings and murders that took place on the Shankill Road. As we drive down the Cromlin Road, to the left is the Victorian Cromlin Road Jail, and on the right is the courthouse. Both buildings were designed by the Ulster architect and engineer Sir Charles Lanyon. The jail is now refurbished and is open for tours. The old jail also houses the McConnell's Whisky Distillery, which is also open for tours and tastings. The courthouse on the right has been through a few developers' hands, and it is thought it will become a hotel. The Mater Hospital on the left, or Mater, depending on which side of the community you're from, is one of the three major hospitals in Belfast, the others being the Royal Victoria and Belfast City Hospitals. Approach the roundabout, we enter Carlisle's Circus. The large church on the right is the Carlisle Memorial Methodist Church. Part of the church is now an Indian community centre, and the rest is under redevelopment. Carlisle Circus is where the Belfast 12th of July Orange Order Parade starts from, as this is where the Orange Order District No. 1 Hall is situated, which can be seen on the right, with a large statue of King William III on the roof. As we continue through the traffic lights, on the left is the old Victorian workhouse. Priest's house to the left can be identified by the large glass door. Also on the left are the newsrooms of one of Belfast's newspapers, the Irish News. And on the right is a statue of Lenin, which is over the entrance to Belfast's largest gay club, the Kremlin. right is Castle Court Shopping Mall, first to open in Belfast in 1990. Even before it opened its doors, it had burned up several times. It is situated on the site of the original Grand Hotel and the Avenue Cinema. The cinema has now reopened inside the shopping mall. This is Donegal Place, and as we continue along towards the City Hall, many more of Belfast shops can be seen on the left-hand side. In front of the shops, you can see the large curved lights with what look like sails on them, carrying the names of many famous ships built in the shipyard. The City Hall can be seen in all its glory from here, and often hosts continental markets and Christmas markets in its grounds. The City Hall is open to the public and tours can be taken. The grounds of the City Hall contain numerous statues and memorials, including the memorial to the Titanic victims, and also the guarantee team who went down trying to keep the ship afloat. As we drive to the rear of City Hall, we will shortly be stopping, so please remain seated until the bus stops and retrieve all your personal belongings before getting off the bus. Thank you for choosing Sightseeing Belfast, the local company. And if you want to join us on a day trip to the Giant's Causeway, all information is available on our website or from our ticket sellers. Please leave us a nice review, and if you want to thank our driver today, tips are accepted at the door.